Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. How's everybody doing today? I hope everybody's good. Now, I usually don't do this on Saturday, but I didn't do it yesterday. And today I'm feeling a lot better. I don't really know what's been wrong with me over the last week, but today I'm feeling a lot better, a lot more peppy, a lot more energetic. And so I decided to do the one I meant to do yesterday, today. And I'll probably be doing a second one too. Uh, this one is about, this vlog is kind of something in two ongoing series. My boundary series and my series, How's Married Life? And I talk periodically about how married life is and issues regarding married life. And I was reading my boundaries book, which I'm about halfway done with and stuff. And there's a section in here that I'm probably not going to talk about, which are boundary conflicts and stuff, different boundary conflicts you may have regarding your family, your children, work, your spouse, your friends, and stuff like that. But specifically, I was reading this part about spouses, and I thought, well, although I'm not going to talk about the rest of it about boundary conflicts, I'd leave that to you to kind of, figure out what kind of boundary conflicts you may be having and stuff. I did want to talk about the one about spouses and stuff, because I think people think there aren't supposed to be boundaries in marriage, which is not true. There are supposed to be boundaries in marriage, but there are healthy boundaries in a grace-filled marriage. And as you know, this book, Boundaries, okay, let's see if I can get it in a better light. Yeah, there we go. This book, Boundaries, by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, is a book. A lot of it's based on biblical principles and stuff. These two men are Christians and Christian therapists and counselors. And so that's a lot of it. I'm a Christian, and that's the way that I live my life, and stuff. So these are some things that I think really would help people, and especially when it comes to marriage and boundaries regarding marriage. There are some things that I learned in this one little couple of pages of the chapter that I was so surprised to find out and really happy to find out. And actually some things that are about to break up some myths that people seem to have about, marriage and Christian marriage specifically. And it's the thing is that boundaries in marriage are important. Although when you come into a marriage, the principle is you become one, you still are individuals. You still have your own personhood. So there are boundaries that you have to keep. There are still things that you have to do when it comes to boundaries in marriage. And, there are things that are yours that are there. And then there are things that belong to you two together, and stuff. And the things that are belong to you are pretty much the same things as in individual boundaries, as if you're just a single individual. But really, the relationship regarding regarding marriage is that you don't want to trespass on another person's personhood, and that's some of the problems that happens when people are married and don't have healthy boundaries, is that it crosses the line and it tries to those things that trespass on people's personhood. It tries to control people's feelings, attitudes, behaviors, choices, values of others. It tries to control everything. It's trying to control instead of letting the person be free. And really, a successful relationship, a successful marriage is based on freedom and stuff. Now you're thinking, what? Yeah, even as successful Christians, that's based on freedom. Your freedom to worship, your freedom to love, your freedom to trust, your freedom to follow, God and stuff. So it's based on freedom. But so is your marriage. It's based on freedom. And when I talk about freedom, I don't mean free to do wrong things and stuff like that. A graceful marriage is not like that. There are principles that you still have to live under as a person, and if you don't, you have to come to your spouse in a loving way and let them know, there are something that you didn't do, or something that was wrong, or something that was against principles that we had for each other and stuff, and let them know. That's a part of establishing healthy boundaries. One of the things that you have control over regarding boundaries is your feelings. And one of the things you have to remember about feelings is you have to communicate those, not just do things. So if your husband comes in late from work every day, okay, you don't start making dinner really early and taking it, and before he's there, you've cleaned all the dishes and all this stuff, and then you sit there pouting. Oh, well, no, that's not how you do that. That's passive aggressive. It's the way to get needs met, but in an unhealthy way, And so that's passive aggressive. You don't take all the food off of there. You don't go clean the dishes. You don't go banging dishes and doing that when he comes in late. Instead, you should be telling him how you feel, and not how you feel about him, or not how you feel about what he's doing. The thing is, when we talk about feelings, and when somebody says, well, you need to tell someone how you feel about something, we usually go, well, I feel that that's not you. That's not your feelings. Your feelings are, I feel hurt when you don't come home. Um, I feel not important when you don't come home on time and stuff. And so there are things that you have to communicate regarding your feelings. You just can't let your feelings just kind of, do the passive aggressive thing, or angry, or things like that, or wait till it's really, it's gone to the next level, and then it's a big fight and all that sort of stuff, and nothing happens. You need to communicate your feelings up front, and stuff, but they're part of your boundaries. You don't want anyone kind of stepping on the boundaries of your feelings. And it's up to you to communicate that. And one thing to remember about boundaries, this is not about the other person. It's not about punishing the other person. It's not about controlling the other person. This is about you making sure that you don't let bad things in. That's it, that you don't let bad things in. Another part that you have control over is your desires. And your desires are an element of your personhood that each spouse needs to take responsibility for. And the thing about what desires you have, and stuff, means, kind of, well, you have a, say you have a, in the example here, say you have a spouse that, is that the late principal, so he's late and stuff, but you don't communicate your desire for them to be on time. Instead, you get mad and you do things that are, passive aggressive and stuff, But, you have to make sure that what desires you have, that person is also willing to give, you know, and stuff. And so we can't just base it on this thing of us, well, I want people to come in on time, and my desire is to have him here, on time for dinner and not late for dinner or whatever and stuff. But, there's there's a there's things that you have to make sure that you're communicating to your spouse. Both people in a marriage have needs and things that they need, and if you don't communicate your desire or your needs to people, then those needs can't be met. You can't just expect people to know what your needs are. Well, my need is to have you here for dinner, and then maybe your husband's need is, hey, I like to, stay late at work so I can get some extra work done, or have some extra work done so I don't have to do it on the weekend or whatever and stuff. And these two people have needs and desires that they're not communicating. And really, in that way, it's not that anybody's bad. It's just people aren't communicating their desires. They're not communicating their needs. And there's a place where you can make boundaries there. If I tell you my needs, if I tell you what it is that I need, then you set up a boundary, and I see if I can meet that. But the thing is, you want me on time at home for dinner every night, and I'm coming in late because I'm working late to try to have extra time so we can have time on the weekend so I don't have to work on the weekend, then everybody needs to communicate that. Then I could understand. That leads to understanding, the principle of you understanding what the other person wants and stuff. There are also limits on what we can give to another person. And I don't know this thing they think, oh, you're supposed to give all you have. You don't give all you have. You can't give all you have. You certainly can't give and give so much till it's there's nothing left, and stuff. Giving is a gift to the other person, and it's something that shouldn't be taken advantage of. So say you have a spouse that always wants you to do projects around the house. Say you're if you're the husband or whatever, he wants you to do projects all around the house and stuff, but you really are resenting doing these projects. And instead of telling your spouse, you know what, I don't want to do all these projects. I don't want to do this every time you ask me to do something. I don't want to do this. I have other stuff that I like to do. I have other hobbies. I have other things that I like to do and stuff. Then you make your needs known once again, but on the limit of what you can give. It's not your problem if your spouse is like, well, I can't believe you won't do all this and you won't do this for me and you won't do that for me. That's sort of emotional blackmail. And so if you love me, that's emotional blackmail. If somebody says if you love me, you would, that's emotional blackmail. Okay? And so the thing is that you are a person who has other needs and other interests. So it's okay to have those. And to tell your spouse, you know what? Hey, on Saturdays, I'll do family projects. And if family projects can't get done on Saturdays, then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you need to hire somebody, you know, and stuff. Don't just give and give until it ends up being a resentfulness building up in you. There are lots of laws regarding, and the same laws that I think I had talked about before was the law of reaping and sowing in marriage, the law of responsibility that your spouse, if they're out of control, if they need to suffer consequences of their behavior. If you have a spouse that's screaming and hollering all the time, if you have a spouse that is an alcoholic, they need to have some consequences instead of you ending up being codependent with them or rewarding that bad behavior. When you don't say anything to a spouse that says has a drug or alcohol problem or something like that, when you don't say, you know what, you come in here drunk one more time and I'm leaving and I'm going to the neighbors or I'm going to my mom's and I'm going to tell them why I'm there, and stuff. People have to face consequences. Remember, when people are irresponsible and drinking and out of control behavior and screaming and hollering are all irresponsible behaviors. Okay, irresponsible people only understand consequences. So when you say, hey, I'm just gonna leave and I'm not gonna come back, and stuff, and I'm gonna tell everybody, then they've suffered some consequences. But if you stay there trying to console them, trying to make them feel better, taking the abuse, taking the drunkenness, well, it'll be okay, if you're making excuses and all that stuff, you have now become codependent, which means that your spouse, who's out of control and irresponsible, is not suffering any consequences. So you'll see no changes in behavior. You also establish no boundaries. When you establish a boundary of consequence, then you may see changes in behavior. You know what? You may not see changes in behavior. But that would be their problem, because at that point you think, hey, I'm going to leave, or we're going to get a divorce if you don't stop, and stuff. And it's important for you to know that. This is not to control people. This is not to control people on little stuff. This is for important issues, for important things, for people that are being emotionally, physically, verbally abusive, that are drug abusers, and things like that. People with really outlandish behavior, okay? This is not a control thing, and it should not be used to control people. But this is the thing where people suffer consequences. It's also the law of responsibility. So you have to take responsibility for what it is that you do. If you're angry, if you're disappointed and stuff, you need to take responsibility for your own feelings and communicating those feelings and stuff. You can't think that your spouse is supposed to read your mind and know what it is that you're thinking. You have to communicate those things to make sure that you don't have those issues. There's the law of power. And that is a nag is something about we have an inability to change another person. I can't change anybody else. And really, when you nag, and I've said this before, I don't like nagging. I don't think nagging does any good for anybody. But when you nag, all you do in effect is you keep a problem going. Accepting someone as they are, respecting their choice to be that way, and then giving appropriate consequences is a better path. If my husband is just, chronically, is chronically bad with money and this and that and won't, and me nagging, you do bad with money, would not do anything. But if once he didn't pay a bill and the lights got shut off, those are some consequences. And then he'd ask me, if my husband asked me, well, can you pay the light bill? And I said, no, that's part of your responsibility. And so the lights are now shut off. And so we're sitting in a dark house. Maybe he changed some of his money habits. But as long as I saved him, he wouldn't do that. If I nagged him, he wouldn't do that. Because usually what happens with saving it comes along with nagging and stuff. And so instead of just saying, you know what, this is what he is, and I guess I'm just going to let him face some consequences of his behavior, women start nagging, and people start nagging and think that's going to change somebody, you know, and stuff. If it's not, you have to make sure that people face the consequences. If you have a wife with out of control spending habits and running up all the cards and all the stuff, yeah, once the cards get cut off and there's nobody paying the cards, yeah, and she has to pay them. She has to pay the bill. Yeah, maybe she'll stop. Maybe she'll think about that. There's a law of evaluation. And the thing is, wise spouses will accept any boundaries. Now, you'll have people, when you start talking about people's anger and setting boundaries about people's anger and bad behavior and all this stuff, they'll get really mad and they'll get really angry and all that stuff. But wise people would eventually accept boundaries. Self-centered spouses, people who are controlling and self-centered, will not accept any boundaries. They get really mad about boundaries because they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And of course, that's just really immaturity and stuff. But I mean, it's the remembering that the boundary deals with yourself, not the other person. You are not demanding that your spouse do something. Even respect your boundaries. You're setting boundaries to say what you will do and what you won't do. And that's why you're setting boundaries. To make sure you keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. It's not even about the other person. Because they don't have to respect them at all. That's fine. If you don't respect them, I won't deal with you. And stuff. But remember that it's for you. It's not a control thing. It's not a thing to make other people do. It's really for you to figure out what you're going to do, what you're willing to do, and what you're not willing to do. There's the law of exposure, and boundaries need to be communicated first verbally and then with actions. They need to be clear and unapologetic. You shouldn't apologize for your boundaries. And I want to say this again, you should not apologize for your boundaries. They are an important part of you being who you are and stuff. So never apologize about that. You don't want passive boundaries. You want to be direct. Passive boundaries are withdrawal, triangulation, pouting, affairs, and passive aggressive behavior. They're destructive to a relationship. You need to communicate your boundaries up front, okay? And you need to be unapologetic about them and not waver regarding your boundaries. Remember, your boundaries are what you will and will not do. They are about you, not about the other person, okay? And things, but the Bible states that a husband and wife have authority over each other's body. There's a mutual authority given freely. One should always remember Jesus' principles. Treat others as you would have them treat you. So you have boundaries over your skin, your physical body, which means violations that can range from hurtful displays of affection to physical abuse. You have boundaries over your words. Your words have to be clear and spoken in love. You have boundaries over truth. Honest communication is always best. Includes telling the other person when he is not aware they may be violating one of God's standards. You have physical space. When you need time away, tell your spouse. Sometimes you need space for nourishment. Other times you need space for limit setting limits on some of the stuff that they do, and stuff. You need emotional distance sometimes. Your spouse, hey, you have to, if you're in a troubled marriage where your partner is having an affair, you need emotional space because you have to gain back trust. And there are some that, you just can't be in the same house or in the same place with that person in the hope of gaining back some trust. Some people may interpret that as punishment, but it's by the actions, not by the words, and stuff. And so, if a person is really changing, if you have a spouse that's had an affair and they're really changing or done something really bad and you've left and got emotional distance and they're really changing, you need to judge them by their actions and not by their words. And that is biblical principle. You need time. You need time apart as in a relationship. My husband and I spend a lot of time together and we really enjoy each other's company. But we also need time away from each other. That is important. Some spouses need the support of other people when they're setting boundaries, especially if they have a spouse that's not used to boundaries, okay? They need other people who do know about boundaries, a therapist, maybe support from your church, a church group or something. You need support regarding your boundaries, and other people come next. Not someone, please, not someone of the opposite sex. Not all this stuff about people having affairs and all this stuff. That's not the way to set any boundaries. You need healthy relationships with other people. Consequences. And you need to communicate consequences to your spouse clearly and enforce them firmly as you said you would. So remember, if you're dealing out consequences, if you have an irresponsible spouse and you're dealing with giving them consequences or letting them reap the consequences of what it is, reap and sow, then you have to let them do that. You can't be, trying to jump in and save them every time because you feel bad or sorry for them or you feel guilty. A lot of boundary kind of violations come with people guilting people or people feeling guilty about doing stuff. And the thing is, you want a better spouse, you want a better marriage, you want a better life, and so that is important. One of the last things I'm going to talk about is, and I'm just going to talk about this, is submission. And a lot of people, when I hear people talk about submission, I don't want to submit, or yes, you should submit to your husband, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And really, one of the things I've always known about the thing about submission is that most people don't really know what it is, even though they think they know what it is. People touting it as something you should do, don't really know what it is. People touting it as something you shouldn't do, don't really know what it is. Okay? Submission, and this is the thing, because it's talking about, well, since this is biblical principles and you're thinking about all this stuff about setting boundaries, oh my goodness, it doesn't sound submissive. Wait. First of all, both husbands and wives are supposed to practice submission, not just wives. Let me say that again. First of all, both husbands and wives are supposed to practice submission, not just wives. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That's Ephesians 5:21. Submission is always the free choice of one party to another. Wives choose to submit to their husbands, and husbands choose to submit to their wives. A really good relationship comes with freedom. Remember? Christ's relationship with the church is a picture of how the husbands and wives should relate. So now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up to her to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any blemish, but holy and blameless. Whenever submission issues are raised, that the authors say, the first question that needs to be asked: what is the nature of the marital relationship? Is the husband's relationship with his wife similar to Christ's relationship with the church? Does she have free choice, or is she a slave under the law? Many marital problems arise when a husband tries to keep his wife under the law. That means under control. And she feels all the emotions the Bible promises the law will bring: wrath, guilt, insecurity, and alienation. And so, for all the husbands and all the men that are talking about submitting, but really talking about putting women under control and under the law, that's what she'll feel. That's what happens. You feel wrath, guilt, insecurity, and alienation. Is that the way you think Christ felt about the church? Freedom is one issue that needs to be examined. Grace is another. Is the husband's relationship with the wife full of grace and unconditional love? Is she in a position of no condemnation as the church? Or does the husband fail to wash her of all guilt? Usually, husbands who quote Ephesians 5 turn their wives into slaves and condemn them for not submitting. If she incurs wrath or condemnation for not submitting, she and her husband do not have a grace-filled Christian marriage. They have a marriage under the law. I just want to say this about submission. Really, this part about men and women both submitting, as husbands and wives, I knew that a long time ago. My pastor told me that. He was a good pastor, a good man, and he was truthful and honest, a man of God. So he knew. When I went to counseling, I already knew that. But I'm so happy to be able to tell you this so people stop misquoting what is the Bible, something they haven't read, haven't studied, don't know, okay? And stuff, and don't know anything about and stuff. Because submission is freedom from both parties. It's not condemning her to a life of control, okay? It's grace-filled. It's loving. It's unconditional love. It's not guilt. It's not insecurity. And if that's what you as a wife are feeling from your husband talking about submission, you don't have a Christ. You don't have a grace-filled marriage. You don't have a Christian marriage. You've got a marriage under the law, which is not the way that Jesus wants it. The thing that happens often when husbands are trying to get their wives to do something that is either hurtful or takes away her will, both of these actions are sins against himself, when he tries to make his wife do that. Husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it just as Christ does the church. Given this, the idea of slave-like submission is impossible to hold. Christ never takes away our will or asks us to do something hurtful. He never pushes us past our limits. He never uses us as objects. Christ gave himself up for us. He takes care of us as he would his own body. We have never seen a submission problem that did not have a controlling husband at its root. And these are the two counselors talking about this. They have never seen a problem with somebody. If you're submitting in the way that is described in the Bible, really the true way, you don't have a problem with submission. Both people are happy to submit to one another. But if you're submitting in the way that is under the law, you always have a submission problem, because really it comes from the controlling husband. When the wife begins to set a clear boundary, the lack of Christ-likeness in a controlling husband becomes evident, because the wife is no longer enabling his immature behavior. She is confronting the truth and setting biblical limits on hurtful behavior. Often when a wife sets boundaries, the husband begins to grow up. I just pretty much read that whole section because I just wanted it to be known. Submission is not a bad thing in a marriage. But you have to do it the right way. The way Jesus wants you to do it. Not the way that people are saying in the world it needs to be done. Okay? That you both are submitting. That he's unconditionally loving her. That he's treating her as he would treat his own body. So if he's hitting her and beating her up, that's not the way you would treat your own body. So this is something for husbands and wives to both think about when you think about boundaries in marriage. Setting boundaries is a good thing in marriage. It's supposed to happen. It means what you will and will not do. It's about you. And once you start setting boundaries, maybe people will start following them. You'll get better treatment. Maybe you'll figure out something about your spouse that you didn't know. Maybe you'll get some help that you need and stuff. But it's important to do those things. Don't let your boundaries go just because you got married. Yes, you came together as one, but you're still two individual people. You still have your individual personhood. And you should cherish that, even in marriage. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. It's a thing made by God, so it's beautiful. But only when we do things as they should be done. And when we don't, then we get, a big mess. So it's something to remember, and it's something to think about, and stuff. I've been enjoying doing this boundary series and a series about how's married life and stuff. I hope your married life is going great if you're married. And if you're not, I hope you're getting some tips for when you get married and stuff. We'll come back next week with more on the boundary series and talking about, different kind of people when it comes to boundaries and stuff. And I'll come back again at some later point and we'll talk about how's married life. So I hope you guys have a happy Saturday. And I will see you later. Bye.